If you've been watching my channel for a while now, you probably already know that I've been highly critical of the Star Wars sequel trilogy, especially The Last Jedi. But guys, I have a confession to make. I'd actually only seen The Last Jedi once, and that was in theaters, and I never actually rewatched it. My initial reaction in theaters was sort of mixed. I liked some parts of it, didn't like others, but I decided I really need to rewatch this movie to get a fuller opinion on how I actually feel about it. So I decided to rewatch The Last Jedi and actually take notes. I did my very best to put aside all my previous biases against it and just try to go in with an open mind and come up with a fresh slate for this movie. And I'm actually going to just read through my notes, pretty much bullet point notes, scene by scene for the entire movie. I highly recommend that you guys stick around for the entire video because I do have a sort of ambitious project, kind of a special announcement at the end. So stick around if you want to hear my opinions on the movie. Starting off with the very first scene, the bomber run, I thought it was very well shot. I loved the way that it captured the epicness of space warfare. However, I think it was a little too dramatic for an opening shot, right? The sacrifice of Rose's sister was beautiful, and that scene was just phenomenally shot, but I think having that in the very beginning sort of cheapens it. I think a scene like that, with that kind of sacrifice and drama, should have been pushed towards the middle or towards the tail end of the film for optimal effect. I thought the Yo Mama jokes by Poe were just really silly and out of place. I thought Hux did a good job in the scene and overall, but I also think he overreacts just a bit in the movie as a whole. I thought Poe getting demoted at the end was a little dumb, but at the same time, I think it makes sense because, in real life military interactions, if you disobey orders, there are going to be consequences, and I think demoting Poe did technically make sense. Going to the very first scene with Luke, I think Luke's lightsaber toss behind his back was a little too dramatic and not really true to his character portrayed in this movie, right? If he really didn't care, he would probably just drop it on the ground and walk away instead of making some big statement. But at the same time, I thought it was a kind of cool scene, so I don't really mind it. I thought there was some decent humor, funny interactions between Luke and Rey. Luke's joke about Jakku really being from nowhere, I thought was a pretty decent joke. I thought Luke's whole attitude when he's on the ship and he tells Rey, "I will never train you no matter what." I thought that was just stupid. Like, why take such an absolutist stance on something that he actually ends up doing a few scenes later? Just seems silly. I personally think Luke overreacts just a bit to R2-D2. I know they're great friends and haven't seen each other in a long time, but for someone who really doesn't care at all about real people that were his best friends, I don't know why he'd really care too much about R2. That's just my opinion. I think Luke just changes his mind too fast overall with how he's so certainly not going to train Rey to actually just straight up training her. I think it's just a little bit forced. That weird ballsack creature that Luke milks, I just think seems out of place and gross. I just don't like it. I think Rey sometimes comes off as a little too emotional for no reason, talking about how she felt something awaken inside her, and I know that's kind of a callback to The Force Awakens, so it's sort of excusable, but sometimes it just feels a little bit off. I think Luke asking repeatedly where Rey is from, who she is, I just think it's kind of weird. Like, he's not asking why she's here or, anything like that. Just, who are you? Where are you from? It seems a little insincere to me personally. Moving to the first throne room scene, I think Andy Serkis's voice acting for Snoke is amazing. I think Snoke sounds really menacing and really cool, and I think he looks kind of cool. I like the fact that we were introduced to this giant figure in the first movie, and then we just actually see Snoke is essentially a normal sized being, except he's very powerful, which I think is cool. I think Kylo has Adam Driver's performance as Kylo Ren, I think, is pretty good. I think Adam Driver is a phenomenal actor. However, I still stand by the fact that and I know this is nitpicky, but he just looks silly. Adam Driver is a weird looking guy, and I just frankly think he's not intimidating, and I just kind of think he looks stupid with his mask off, personally. Moving to the first bridge scene, I thought Kylo not pulling the trigger on his missiles and killing Leia was an interesting choice. I don't know if I'd necessarily like it or not, but the fact that he seemed to kill Han with really no hesitation, I just find it weird that he spares Leia in that reason. But again, I think it does make his character a little bit more interesting. I think the whole Leia Mary Poppins shit flying through the air is just goofy as hell. It just looks dumb. Like, I'm fine with Leia being a Force user. In fact, I think it's great. It makes so much sense. But just her flying through the air in space, like, it was stupid. It just looked dumb. And just that scene where she's coming through, it looks almost like a door is like gonna close and like chop her hand off. So I think that shot was pretty stupid looking. Just another note about Leia. I just don't like Leia in the sequel trilogy. I don't think Carrie Fisher is very convincing as she was in the original trilogy. Like, I just don't think Leia works as a general. Right? Nothing about her is commanding at all. Like, I could see her as a teacher, as a counselor, as a Jedi, but her as a military figure, it just doesn't work. Just her voice, she just doesn't sell this character, in my opinion. I'm sorry, but that's not a general I would follow into battle. That's someone I might ask for advice, but just, I don't think she does a good job portraying a general. I think the holdo scene, I know it's very controversial. I just think the fact that Holdo has purple hair makes her look stupid as shit. I'm sorry, but it just looks stupid. A purple hair lady in Star Wars. Yeah, I know I'm probably gonna get some shit for that, but it looks stupid as fuck. She's really just kind of a condescending bitch, and I don't know, man. Also, there's a schnoz lady, a lady with a really big nose, and then there's a Margaret Thatcher looking lady, and they just look silly as shit. I don't really know why I wrote this down, but I kind of put as a side note in the Luke scenes that I kind of like the attention to detail they put in the background. Like, there's a scene where you can see a sea monster kind of like peeking out of the water and going back in. I thought that looked really cool. And I actually personally like the Porgs. I think the Porgs are really cute and just fun. It's just kind of a good form of comic relief. And also the fact that they were kind of added just because there were so many puffins on that island that they couldn't quite edit all of them out. I just thought it's kind of a cool little story, seeing the Porgs kind of nest in the Millennium Falcon and interact with Chewbacca. I think it's pretty cool. I like it. Going to the Rose intro, now I know a lot of people don't like Rose for various reasons, but I actually think she's a decent character. I think it makes sense that she was so emotional. I mean, her sister died, and I think her touching the pendant is a really cool form of symbolism to tie it back to her sister. And I think the reaction to Finn, because Finn kind of gained a little bit of fame as a Resistance hero, I think it makes sense that she'd be kind of, sad for her sister's death, but also enamored by Finn. I think it kind of is cool. And it does show how important Finn, is to the Resistance. However, I think the fact that she shocks Finn, when she realizes that he's trying to desert, that whole I just flipped the switch, I thought that it was just too out there. Like, why didn't she ask why he was deserting, why he was leaving? She never questions him or asks his motives. She just responds purely emotionally and completely irrationally. And in some ways it makes sense, but wouldn't you want to know why he's leaving? So I just thought, while her character sort of makes sense, I thought that part was kind of strange. Like, just ask, why are you leaving? I think the scene right after that where Finn, Rose, and Poe, kind of plan to find the code breaker and all that and, leave the ship and all that stuff. I think that was pretty cool. I think that scene was funny and just kind of reminiscent of the original trilogy in some ways. Like, I really do like those characters interacting in that scene. I thought the Maz Kanata scene was a little bit whack, but, nothing too bad. The whole, tracking the ship through hyperspace, to me, seemed like a MacGuffin for the side plot of Finn and Rose, finding the code breaker, it just seems something purely created to give them something to do. And we've never really seen that technology in any other Star Wars movie that I'm aware of, and that itself doesn't make it bad, but I just think it was kind of lazy writing, in my opinion. I think the Rey and Kylo Force interactions throughout the entire movie were absolutely fantastic. They were visually stunning, emotionally stunning. I truly thought that was a really awesome way to innovate, Force relationships. I really loved it. I thought Rey, learning about the Force, it was a pretty good scene, the reach out joke where, Luke tells her to reach out and she puts her arm out. I thought that was great, just to show how ignorant she really is, but how willing to learn she is, and I really love that. I do think Rey was a little too quick to learn the nature of the Force, but at the same time, it could just show how powerful and how naturally gifted she is, so I think it could have been done slower, but I still liked it. There could have been a little bit more failure on her part, but it's not a massive critique. I thought that whole scene visually looked really nice, but at the same time, some of the cuts seemed a little cheesy, like we were watching kind of a Google Earth ad or something like that. Just all those little cuts of nature and going underground and, looking at all the whatever. It just seemed a little bit cheesy to me and a little out of place, but still beautiful. I think the fact that Luke was really scared and skeptical of Rey's power and her potential inclination to the dark side was very understandable. However, I still think Luke deciding not to train her after that was sort of irresponsible, because imagine not training her, what she could go on to do anyways. Like, what if Luke denied her and she went to the dark side to learn the Force, or she somehow learned it on her own? And I think that was kind of irresponsible of Luke, so I am glad that he ended up training her, of course. I think Kylo Ren admitting that he was a monster was really interesting. It definitely makes his character stand out from other dark side users, such as Anakin, who acts like, he's doing something good, kind of that evil genius, working for the greater good. Kylo admits that he's horrible, like he kind of embraces it, but you can still see the conflict within him, even as he's saying that, right? Even as he thinks, oh, he's truly a monster, he's saddened by it. So I do think Adam Driver's performance and just the facial expressions are really brilliant to capture that. I think the intro to the casino scene was pretty much pure eye candy, and I'm not a big fan of it at first, but actually watching it again, I think it's kind of cool just to, look in the background and kind of see what weird creatures and weird characters they came up with. So I think it's pretty ridiculous. It is sort of the modern or the sequel example of the cantina scene, so it is kind of fun to see all the stupid creatures they created. I do kind of like that. I think Rose's whole spiel about, animal abuse and abuse of power was just kind of cheesy and out of place. And, when she says, the only way you get this rich is selling weapons to the First Order, that was kind of a horrible line, but they did kind of go and amend that later on in the film, so I can't critique it too hard. Going back to the scenes with Rey and Luke, that scene of Rey swinging her lightsaber is just so raw and emotional. I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie, because you actually feel like if you had a lightsaber, that's what you would do. You would just go ham with it and just start swinging it, and like all the raw, untrained emotion, in Rey doing that, the scene is just beautiful. There's some really beautiful shots on that scene, and truly one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie. I think Luke's whole speech about the Jedi being a failure was sort of interesting. I think he made some good points about it, but I didn't exactly love it. I think there was also some kind of hypocrisy in it. So it's okay, but not the greatest. I think him talking about the Skywalker bloodline is just overall confusing, because this movie sort of gives messages that, oh, bloodlines don't matter and who you're born to doesn't matter, but they still kind of do. It's kind of back and forth on that, and I just find it a little bit confusing. I don't like how Luke never actually explains why the darkness was growing within Kylo. Like, we never explain Snoke's motive or, how Snoke actually corrupted Kylo. It's just, Luke got bad vibes, Snoke had corrupted him, but they never actually tell us why, and I feel like that's really important. And one of the parts I loved about the prequels is we actually got to see how Anakin turned to the dark side, but we never really see, where that initial dark side inclination came from for Kylo. So I just really don't like that. I think when Rey tells Luke that Kylo failed you and I won't fail you, I actually really like that, because it definitely shows how confident Rey is, and it does put some kind of personal responsibility on the apprentice. Like, it was Kylo in some way who failed Luke, and I think that was a great way of kind of pushing Luke's character out of his shell, out of his depression, and blaming himself for things that he couldn't fully control. So I really like that. BB-8 is still dope. I think BB-8's design is amazing. He's still a great character. Really one of my favorite parts of the sequel trilogy. That scene where Rose tells those kids that we are the Resistance, and the kids are like so happy, it makes no sense, because, why would those kids support the Resistance? Like, there's no evidence that, they were on a system controlled by the First Order, or they'd been abused by the First Order, or the New Republic, or anything like that. So, I guess it's just kind of symbolic that those kids were oppressed and living a horrible life, and a Resistance was kind of a chance for hope for them. But it still made no sense why they were so willing to just, help them out. I just thought it was a little weird. Benicio Del Toro is a phenomenal actor, one of the best actors in this entire movie. Just the way he captures the Codebreaker, like, his mannerisms are just spot on, and I think his character was fantastic, but they also could have done a little more with him. I think he kind of went to waste towards the end, but again, I have to really give it to Benicio Del Toro, because just a phenomenal job. On a related note, I think Mark Hamill did a phenomenal job playing Luke in this movie. The joke with Kylo's shirt off was pretty bad. That was a pretty bad joke. Kylo's whole speech about kill the past, that was phenomenal, right? Kylo said that, he killed Han because he didn't need him anymore. He was letting go of his attachments, and how Rey had been constantly seeking the approval of a father-like figure in Han and now in Luke was just great, because it's really evocative of the whole Jedi Council, philosophy going back to the prequel movies. And I think that connection for me, I didn't really make so much in the first viewing, and that really changed this movie for me, because what happens when you really let go of attachments, when you really let go? I mean, why can't you kill the people that you loved, because there's no emotion, there's no attachment anymore. And it's almost like Kylo is preaching kind of classical Jedi philosophy when he says let go of that attachment. So I really thought that was interesting, right? It even goes back to ideas that in meditation and letting go of attachments, if you really empty your mind, you don't know what's going to enter. It might be good, but it might also be darkness. And I think that whole gray Jedi approach in this movie was really great. I think it's actually deeply philosophical. It's critical of the Jedi. It does kind of make us understand the Force on a deeper level. So I love that. The whole 3 different perspectives of when Luke confronts Kylo was really cool. I really just liked how the story kind of changed every time to actually really reveal what actually happened. It took kind of a while, kind of towards the middle of the movie, to really know what happened in that scene. I thought Rey going to the Well of the Dark Side was a pretty cool scene. It was really trippy and almost psychedelic in a way, and I don't really know what it told us thematically. I don't think it was that important, but it looked pretty cool, and you definitely just felt really alone and isolated. You could kind of relate to how Rey was feeling at the time. Going back to the different perspectives of Luke confronting Kylo, and I don't want to go too into this, but I just wrote down how I like the way that it brought into the discussion issues of predestiny and self-fulfilling prophecies, and just kind of seeing that conflict of how do you know when someone's going to turn bad? And maybe your mistrust in them is what turned them bad to begin with. And that whole, like, paradox almost is really interesting. I love the way that Luke describes Kylo as a frightened boy. Just a look in Kylo's eyes of terror. It was really great, and it shows how that kind of fear did lead him to the dark side in many ways. I loved how Rey actually just stopped taking shit from Luke and actually hit him with his stick and actually dueled him. Was really awesome. Like, that scene looks great. I love that Rey is just taking charge and just saying, like, enough of your bullshit, Luke. Like, I want to know the truth. And I really love that. I think that was a great scene. And of course, the scene itself showed that Luke is still more powerful than Rey. Luke is still the most powerful Force user probably in the galaxy. The fact that he kind of easily, disarms her is kind of cool. But it does show how, Rey was ferocious and just not taking shit from him anymore. So I like that. Going back to one of the throne room scenes, it just makes me think, like, we really don't even need Snoke. Like, Kylo really could have just gotten to himself, like, turned himself to the dark side. This whole Snoke thing is just, like, Snoke's character just sucks. He's never developed, and we never actually understand what's going on or how he turned Kylo. Kylo could have sort of turned himself to the dark side. We don't necessarily need that puppet master, controlling. It could have been Kylo's own emotions and that misunderstanding with Luke that turned him to the dark side. I think that would have been a lot cooler. When Yoda comes into the movie, that joke about the books not being page turners was pretty damn funny. I think Yoda is pretty great in this movie. I love how he says, failure is the greatest teacher. I think that's very wise. However, I don't like it when he says, lost Ben you have, and he pretty much says, don't lose Rey. Like, I just think that's against, the philosophy that we've seen in pretty much growing up with Star Wars. Like, they just accept the fact that Ben is lost. I mean, they accepted that he's a lost cause, and I just think after Luke, believed that there was good in Vader, someone who literally slaughtered younglings, did way worse things than Kylo has ever done, or will even dream of doing, and yet Kylo is somehow now irredeemable. I just think that is kind of a conflicting message, and I really don't like it. I think the scene with Luke and Yoda sitting together while the hut burns down visually was really cool. I really liked it. Going back to the ship scene with Benicio Del Toro's character, I really liked the scene where he says this guy made money selling weapons to the bad and the good guys, right? That was just really cool, and it kind of amended Rose's ignorance, I would say. So it did kind of also tie in loosely to the kind of gray Jedi, relative morality type of stuff, which I think is kind of cool. I think it definitely gives us something to think about in the scheme of things. I kind of liked it. I thought Rose giving the Codebreaker the chip was kind of cool. Like, it showed that she was willing to get over her sentimentality and that she knew what she needed to do for the Resistance. So I like that. That other scene with Holdo, it kind of made no sense. I just thought that whole plot was convoluted and weird. It just didn't fit into the movie. There's no reason to care about Holdo as a character. That guy who dies for Holdo and he blows up, that was funny as shit. I mean, it just is stupid. I thought there was a lot of rip-offs of Return of the Jedi in this movie, and I guess that's sort of a criticism, but I don't think it's that bad. Right, the Rey and Kylo, in the Snoke throne room scene where they're like watching the fleet get destroyed, all that felt like a rip-off of Return of the Jedi, and how Kylo delivers, Rey to Snoke and all that. It just felt like a bit of a rip-off. Hux bitch slapped Finn, that was hilarious as shit. I don't know where that came from, but it was funny. The way that Snoke says how he bridged Rey and Kylo's mind, I thought it was cheap and unnecessary. Like, we can just have them having an authentic connection. Like, is that so hard? But no, it has to be the puppet master bridging everything together. I just thought it was stupid. Another reason Snoke is pointless. I just thought it was weird that Snoke never sensed Kylo turning the lightsaber towards him. I mean, I get why he felt that, he's turning it towards Rey, but I still don't get that. Like, Snoke being an all-powerful being or whatever, Should have sensed that. It's kind of stupid. Benicio Del Toro's character, I keep calling him that, the code breaker, turning to the First Order was pretty great. His character kind of just disappears after that, but I did like it. It makes a lot of sense. Rey and Kylo teaming up to fight Snoke's guards. That scene was awesome. It was incredible. It looked great. It was just so gritty and so much different from like the prequel era lightsaber fights that were all just flippy, acrobatic nonsense. Like, this was just hardcore. It just felt real, and it was just really fun to watch. You know, when Kylo says, "It's time to let old things die," you're still holding on, let go. I love that, right? And the fact that, you know, Rey's parents were just useless. They were nothing. They were, you know, they sold her for drinking money. I love that, you know. I love that kind of nihilistic tendency of Kylo Ren, and it just makes me ask, why didn't Rey join him? That's what we all want to see. I wanted to see Rey take his hand and join him, and then we have an interesting third movie. But she doesn't, you know, she doesn't join him. And I don't know. That's probably the thing I wanted the most. It's like this movie opens doors and then shuts them in your face. And I really wish she joined him, personally. It would have made for a much more interesting and dynamic third movie, in my opinion. Captain Phasma Finn fight scene looked pretty good. You know, Phasma being a pointless character is hardly even a critique because, you know, Boba Fett wasn't much of a character in the original trilogy, and it's like, Phasma looks cool. She's there to sell merchandise. I'm fine with that. You know, Finn saying he is Rebel scum, I thought that was a pretty decent callback to the original trilogy. I really like that. How Finn and Rose survived that scene doesn't make much sense to me, but, you know, we're kind of used to that. It is a sci-fi fantasy movie, so that's okay. I wrote down Hux equals stupid baby, and Hux is just shit, you know, like, I think the acting is okay, but Hux just becomes a little crybaby and kind of a bitch, and I just get sick of watching him over the course of the movie. The final battle, going to the final battle scene, Poe driving his ship out there and the panel falling off and his foot going through, that was just kind of cool, just to show how shitty all those, you know, transports were, and they were just really just that ragtag team of rebels just doing their best, and I thought it was funny. Again, there's a little bit of a Return of the Jedi ripoff with them flying through the cave. Looked exactly like the Millennium Falcon flying through the second Death Star, but again, it was also kind of a cool callback. Kylo and Hux, like, repeating themselves. I forget what they even said, but it was kind of funny. It shows how they're kind of vying control, or trying to vie for control over the First Order in the power vacuum that Snoke left behind. I kind of like that. I don't know how I feel about the scene where Finn drives into the laser beam and then saved by Rose. Like, my initial reaction is just, let Finn die. He's not accomplishing that much in the large scheme of things, and I think it would have been a cool way to wrap up his character, you know, letting him die, sacrificing himself against the First Order that he left. And in some way, I think it was, yeah, they should have let him die. It would have been more cinematic, but also at the same time, what's the point, right? Like, he is a main character, and I guess he still sort of has a reason to be around. And of course, they're not going to kill like a main character actor in one of these films, so again, there's really no point of him dying, so I'm fine with Rose saving him. It was cliche, you know, them kissing and her saying how we gotta fight for what we love, not fight for what we hate. I actually kind of like that. It was cheesy as shit, but it does make sense, you know, fight for what you love, not fighting against what you hate, but holding on to, you know, what you love, what you have. And I actually thought that was a pretty good message. You know, all that shit in the end with Luke coming back and saying, I came to face him, I can't save him, and Leia saying, oh, my son is truly gone. It just, again, seems to go against Star Wars. It goes against the philosophy that, you know, makes Star Wars enjoyable. Like, it's just this acceptance that, you know, we felt some bad vibes from Kylo, and he's irredeemable now. He's gone. He needs to die. It's like, Luke, you saved Vader, and you're really giving up, you know, on your own nephew? You know, like, you saved your father, now you're giving up on him. It seems ridiculous to me. It does seem against Luke's character. And I know that these movies have to take risks and they have to develop, different, character personalities or traits to meet the conflict, but I just thought it went really against Luke's character. I really like the red and white color scheme of the battle, and it seems a little bit like a ripoff of Hoth, but I really thought it looked cool. And I like the whole crystal foxes running around the cave. I thought that whole scene and that whole atmosphere just looked really nice. Yeah, what else here? Luke dusting off his shoulder, like, as a taunt to Kylo, was dumb as shit. Like, it was just the fact that he is mentally, like, he's physically on his island and then does that with his mind is just laughable and kind of a dumb joke. I think the whole thing about Rey lifting rocks as like a callback to the earlier scene where Luke says that the Force is not all about lifting rocks, I thought that was a great callback. And then Rey literally just has to lift rocks. I thought that was hilarious and really nicely done. Luke admitting that he failed Kylo, but Luke says he won't be the last Jedi. Right? I think it's weird, like Luke again saying, well, you're done, you're fucked pretty much, but we have Rey, we always have Rey. Like, again, he's putting his hope in just a single person, right? What if Rey turns bad? What if Rey goes to the dark side? But nope, it's Kylo is done, he is irredeemable, but Rey can still save him. I know Rey's the main character, and I like Rey, and I just think that, I guess it's just the approach the movie took, but I think it does send mixed signals. I think Luke having his blue lightsaber was really cool. The blue on red, just kind of classic. I like the look of it. I think the fact that Luke decided to come back as, really just an illusion and not actually come back was kind of interesting, because he actually kind of allowed Kylo to strike him first in anger and just kind of bait Kylo out a little bit without actually having to fight him. He just let Kylo strike out in anger, but without being beaten, without actually being killed by Kylo, which I thought was kind of cool, because he's really just toying with him and saying, you're never going to be as powerful as me, pretty much. And it was kind of funny. I kind of liked it, so it did kind of serve a purpose of him coming back, mentally, but not physically coming back. And I thought that whole scene, looked really cool. How you could just see Kylo starting to lose it. He's just starting to lose it, and I did like that. Luke's death scene was beautiful. Again, whether or not they should have killed Luke in this movie, it's up for debate. It's really just kind of personal preference or character development, but the death scene itself with the two sons and the music and Luke just disappearing, it was great. It really was a good send-off for his character. Very last scene in the movie with the broom kid. It seems kind of dumb, kind of silly, especially because they're not really a focus of the movie, and you just kind of come back to that, like, out of nowhere. But they do kind of tie that in The Rise of Skywalker, so it is understandable. As much as I don't love it, I understand what they were going for. And that is pretty much it. Like, there's a lot I can deconstruct about this movie and go into depth about, but this video's been way too long anyways, and if you actually have stuck around for the whole video, you're a legend. Talking about my ambitious project that I probably won't do, but I might, is actually kind of going back and reconstructing the sequel trilogy, what I would have done differently for each movie, and kind of salvaging each movie based on what we're left with. So, I have mixed feelings about this movie, I really do. And I could sit here and talk probably for hours, if not days, about this movie. And I think my opinions of it got a little bit better. I think this is by far the most interesting sequel movie. I think it did the best aspects of the sequel trilogy are in this movie, but also some of the worst. And I think the plot does, in a way, fall apart at the end of this movie. And that's why we're kind of stuck with The Rise of Skywalker. So, again, I think it was great to rewatch it. I'd highly recommend that you go and rewatch this movie if you haven't seen it in a while. Maybe your opinions will change. I know mine did. If not just slightly change, they still changed a bit. and I think it was definitely worth it. So, with that said, guys, I love you. Thanks for sticking around for this entire video. See you next time. Peace.